Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Welcome back to Longmeadow. Ned is a lot bigger and we've had quite an interesting winter this year. We had extreme cold in December, got down to -14 here, and then we had flooding. It was very wet, and to cap it all, we've had the driest February for I think 90 years. So we've had a bit of everything. And the garden, by and large, is starting to look really good. But I am taking stock of the damage, and this is a good example. This is rosemary, and it's got these dark chocolate-coloured blackened stems. That's a fungal problem, usually caused by too much wet. Now, if you've got this, cut out all the brown parts and then burn it. What's left behind, if it's green and untouched, will be fine. Now, in the case of these plants here, it's too damp, the soil really. I'm going to take it out and start again with something else. But it's not all doom and gloom. The garden is starting to burst forth into spring, and it won't be long before everything will be glowing with health and beauty. And we've got masses to look forward to. On today's programme, Carol celebrates the first flowers of the year at Colesbourne Gardens in Gloucestershire.
They're what I call Cinderella plants. They have to do the lot, shoot through the ground, flower, set seed, and then go to sleep again, until we see them in all their beauty the following spring.
We meet a man who bought a botanic garden on a whim.
This is the first chance we're going to get to even see the gardens, to explore it, to figure out what on earth we've done with this crazy project.
And Adam visits RHS Hyde Hall to discover which plants will thrive in a changing climate.
Things like the Carpobrotus here, absolutely a succulent plant through and through. And yet, in this little niche, this little area, it's managed to survive. For me, this is exciting.
And I shall be planting a new clematis and pruning my old ones. By and large, I'm amazed how well the garden has come through, because we had a temperature difference between July and December of 50 degrees centigrade. And here in the Paradise Garden, these grasses, Anamanthele lessoniana, pheasant grass, are evergreen. And of course that means they should be green. So they've all died. And I could replace them. Or I could use this as an opportunity to try something different. And in light of the climate changes we're having, I think that's what I'm going to do. So my plan is to take out all the Anamanthele, and in their place I'm going to plant a lot more bearded iris, which do really well in here, and then intermingle those with annuals, cornflowers, poppies. And what I'm looking for is to recreate the idea of a Persian carpet, which of course is completely appropriate for a paradise garden. So in many ways, this has given me the opportunity to experiment, to expand my ideas and let the garden evolve. So, okay, that's all good, that's all exciting. But there have been some really bad results of this weather. Look at this. There, that isn't a pretty sight, is it? This is a lemon tree, and it was wrapped in fleece, protected by the thickly insulated frame that we put up in the autumn. You've got thick concrete walls, but it wasn't enough. The good news is it's not dead. There is new growth. Bad news is I'm going to have to cut it right back. I will cut it back probably to about where my hand is. But I won't do that yet. I'll wait till the risk of frost is past. That will be at least another month. But it does mean I won't have any lemons this year, because they fruit on the previous year's growth. And in a few years' time, it may well be as good as it was before. But the main thing is, it's making me reconsider about how I store tender plants, and maybe even what plants I try and store, if our weather is going to continue to be so extreme. Now, Carol has visited Colesbourne Gardens near Cheltenham, which has a superb display of those precious flowers that bridge the seasons between winter and spring.
It's been a cold, bleak winter, but although the trees are still bare, nonetheless, daylight length is getting longer. Temperatures are beginning to rise, and here and there, plants are bursting through the soil, making great carpets of colour to tell us that spring is truly on its way. All these flowers are suited to nestling amongst the feet of trees and shrubs. And in late winter, they awake from their slumber. Their moment in the spotlight, though, is so fleeting. They really have to make the most of it, exploit that opportunity before the canopy fills in overhead, depriving them of light and water. They're what I call Cinderella plants. They have to do the lot, shoot through the ground, flower, set seed, and then go to sleep again until we see them in all their It has so many different ways of making sure that it not only grows but flowers beautifully. First of all, within their leaves, they've got a protein which stops ice crystals forming. It's a kind of antifreeze within the leaves. And not only do the leaves not freeze, but nor does the flower. And the temperature within that inner cup is actually several degrees higher than the ambient temperature. So the pollen within it is protected. It's absolutely splendid. And as well as being very cold in the winter, it's often really thrashing wind too. And yet these snowdrops remain pristine. And that's because behind the petals is this lovely skinny little stem. And that means no matter how much this is blown around, the flower remains intact. You never see a damaged snowdrop, not unless I've sat on one. Snowdrops are one of the earliest flowers to bloom, and at Colesbourne they're joined by an array of companions that extend the season of colour once they've died back. We could hardly have a more glamorous companion than this. These great rivers of brilliant magenta just running right the way through the snowdrops. It's cyclamen coum. It's an easy, straightforward plant to grow, and it spreads itself all over the place. It's found all around the Mediterranean, often growing in a similar sort of situation to snowdrops, so damp shade at the edge of woods. But sometimes it grows right out in the open too. It's going to go on for weeks, flower following flower. And sometimes it's brilliant magenta like this. Sometimes it's white and loads of different colours in between too. You can see that it hasn't all been planted meticulously. It's been helped along by nature. As the seed pod hits the ground and bursts open, the little seeds within it, the starch in them, turns to sugar, and it's irresistible to ants. They move in and carry the seeds away. And on the way, a few of the clumsier ones drop the seeds on the ground, and eventually new plants spring up. And if you want to achieve this kind of thing yourself, then start off just with a couple of corms. You can buy dry corms in September and plant them then, but a better way, I think, is to go for a growing plant in the spring and just plant 2 or 3 and then let them get on with it. Eventually they will spread. Another great plant to herald the arrival of spring, and perfect for a more open and sunnier position, is the crocus. And here, one plant in particular really comes into its own. It's Crocus thomasinianus, affectionately known as Tommy's. It's one of the most evocative plants of the spring. A wild species, it naturalises brilliantly well, and it seeds itself all over the show. Now at the moment, they're all closed up. It's an almost opposite strategy to snowdrops who hang their heads to protect their pollen. Here, the flowers are facing upwards. But should the sun shine, those petals will open wide to display that delightful bright orange stamen. And of course, it's not just us who can see them, but the bees and any pollinating insects are drawn in towards the crocus. When they come up in the spring and flower, let the leaves come on after that and don't mow until all the goodness has been drawn down into the corm from those leaves. That way they'll get bigger and better every year. And what could say spring more? There are hellebores with every shape and size, every kind of marking, some with spotted sepals, some with double flowers. Absolutely wonderful and very, very easy and straightforward to grow. It's one of the longest lived perennials that we can grow in our gardens. In the wild, it grows under the canopy of trees or at the edge of woodland, so it has its own natural source of leaf mould. And when you're planting your hellebores, if you can enrich the soil with leaf mould, really good compost, so there's lots of organic content, they'll absolutely love it. Although the range of colours within hellebore flowers is so diverse, nonetheless, those colours are always subtle. And one of the reasons for that is because what looks like petals are actually sepals, which means not only do they protect the inner workings of the flower, but also they stay on the flower for ages and ages. But at this time of year, they really are a standout plant, and they go so beautifully with this whole spring picture. There are so many exquisite flowers at this time of year. And you don't need a vast lawn or a huge woodland to enjoy them. Just the edge of a bit of grass or underneath shrubs or trees will do. And there's something about their ephemerality that makes both them and this time of year so extra special.
Well, certainly that ephemerality has played out here at Longmeadow in the last week or two, because the snowdrops were fantastic this year, really good display, and then they just go almost overnight, and that's it for another year. But of course there's more to come, and this table outside the potting shed has become one of the things I look forward to more than anything else in the whole of the year. And this year, the star has undoubtedly been this extraordinary daffodil. This is called Arctic Bells. Absolutely beautiful. I love it. And this has been flowering for a month or so already. And then gradually we get these lovely irises coming through, the rich purples, blues and yellows, the crocuses, which are coming in waves and also going in waves. So there's a lot of care and a lot of attention, but it's worth it for this glorious few weeks of spring delight. Now, it's time to make our first visit this year to one of your gardens, and it belongs to Donna Harvey-Bailey, who does her gardening in Staffordshire.
Hi, I'm Donna, and welcome to my potting shed. Today I'd like to share with you how we make these. These are little cages that we hang in our apple orchard from the trees. We stuff them full of fur and fleece and anything fluffy so that birds can come and take them away and make cosy nests for their chicks. This is what you'll need to make them. A good sharp pair of secateurs, some garden string, some prunings, mine are from my apple trees, and a piece of garden wire. And here's how we make them. We collect together our prunings from our apple trees. I've got 6 pieces here. We tie a piece of string directly into the middle. Tie it nice and tight to keep the twigs secure. Once you've done that, take them in both hands using this as your middle point and bend your twigs to make this shape. Then simply get our garden wire and wrap it up around the top. Once your wire is securely wrapped around the top of your twigs, gently pull to make the round shape. Go all the way around until you're finished like this. You can then prune the tops if any aren't the same length, if you're a perfectionist. And there we have it. Our twig cage for fluff and fleece for our garden birds.
Birds are such an important part of any garden. So if, like Donna, you can help them with their nesting material, then so much the better. And don't forget that they do need feeding still. Now, it's not too late to prune roses. In fact, now is a good time. And this is a rose called Crown Princess Margaretta, and it's wonderful. It's yellow with an apricot-y colour, a beautiful, beautiful rose. It was sold and I bought it as a shrub, and it's since been found that it grows better as a climber. But like any climber, it produces its flowers on new growth. So what I want to prune it back to is a framework from which the new side shoots can grow and they will carry the flowers. The first thing to do is to remove any growth that is damaged or diseased. Right down at the base, like that, and then cut back the weakest growth hardest, replacing it with nice, strong, healthy new shoots, like this one here. This is really good. So there's one here, that's pretty weak, so we're going to cut that right back, like that. You're looking as though it's fascinating, chap. You've never done any rose pruning, have you? You'll learn. You'll learn. Now, if I left it, it would get top heavy and less growth underneath, and you'd end up with a clump of flowers at top and nothing lower down. So I want to prune it back, and very quickly we'll get new growth, and on that new growth, there'll be a mass of flowers. Once you've got back to a reasonable framework, start tying in. That will do. It's not a model of how to prune a rose, but this started life, don't forget, for about 6 years as a tightly trained shrub. So it's grown out to become a climber. And around about the end of May, it will be smothered in glorious flower. One of the things that I find most exciting about gardening nowadays is that there is a new generation coming through. And we went to Sheffield to meet Danny Gallagher.
The two things that govern my life, I think, are skateboarding and gardening. They both teach you a sense of patience and perseverance as well. So you have to keep trying things over and over again to get it right. Skateboarding is a form of meditation. You know, you can't think about anything else while you're doing it because your focus is there, otherwise you're going to get hurt. And gardening is another form of meditation, but a much more chilled out and relaxed one. You know, I can let my mind wander when I'm in the garden. My name is Danny Gallagher, and we are in the middle of Sheffield at my 5-year-old forest garden. In a forest, you don't have people going in with watering cans or fertilisers, and it just takes care of itself. So that is what I'm trying to emulate. When I arrived on the site, there was already quite a lot of trees. Nice orchards already planted, so there was a couple of pear trees, some plum trees, some cherry trees. So rather than cutting these trees down, I come up with a design to just work around them. I came into gardening as a forager, so I've been foraging for 15, 20 years, and it was that really brought me close to nature. So it's observing all of the different plants and the fungi that are all throughout the seasons and watching how they all interconnect within the forest system. And I think that's what really sparked my love for growing. I don't dig in my garden. I use mulch and I use organic matter on top of the soil to create a protective layer. Not only does that help to trap in moisture and relieve the soil from some of the elements like sun and wind, but it also helps to add nutrients to the soil itself. And I do have a wood chipper myself, so I do make some of my own wood chip. I also actively encourage mycelium. And by inoculating the wood chip with certain mushroom substrates, I can then grow specific mushrooms and add an extra edible layer to my forest garden. So mycelium, it is made of tiny little thread-like hyphae, and these fuse together to hold together your soil, and it just creates a really strong soil structure. In a traditional forest, you have layers, and in a forest garden, you try to emulate a natural young woodland with edible species. So I have an upper canopy, which is my elderberries, and I can use this for not only shade, but it also helps to provide food for the birds, and I use it for my own tinctures and for wines and champagnes. Then I have my lower canopy, which is made up of my fruit trees and my bay trees. The shrub layer is another really important feature of the forest garden. So I have currants, raspberries and gooseberries as well. So the next layer after the shrub layer is my herbaceous layer. And for this layer, I use a mix of edible, ornamental and perennial plants like these dahlias, these courgettes. Your rosemary, things that love the sun. And as we come round, we would plant more kind of shade-loving plants and also your damp-loving plants like your chives, your mint, your lemon balm, your comfrey and bits like that. My herb sparrow is made out of bricks, which I found all along my allotment, and they're a really useful material because they help to trap in heat and they also keep it cool during the summer. Utilising some of this dead spaces in the bricks is a really great way to put more plants in as well, and I like to grow berries that like the sun, like strawberries. And it helps ripen the berries up a little bit quicker. And I've positioned my herb sparrow here because it's right in front of my fruit orchard. And what that does is it helps to attract bees and insects, and then that in turn pollinates my fruit trees. Because all of these gardens on this site are hedged in, it means that they're very private, and it means that I've been able to experiment a little bit more in my gardening style and the features that I add into my allotment. I have a wood-fired bathtub that is in a little space down in the corner that I perhaps wouldn't be able to have in, you know, a traditional open field style allotment. I share this space with all of the wildlife around the woodlands, and sometimes it can be quite hard. They do eat a lot of things. This is my sweet corn that the squirrels managed to get to last week. And they've also had a good go at my courgettes and my squash. But I'd way rather have them coming in than them not come in at all. So I do actively encourage all the animals to enter the garden, and I don't mind sharing my
I think that every gardener knows exactly what Danny's talking about. That magic, that childlike wonder of when your hands in the soil and nurturing seeds and plants and seeing them grow is really special. And you know, it doesn't wane. The more you do it, the stronger it gets, the more magical it is. Now, you may remember, last year I grew loofahs for the first time and asked as many of you as possible to join in. And I harvested mine. And one I tried to make a conventional loofah out of, we made a bit of a hash of it actually, and the loofah I got was rather damaged. And the more I looked at them, the more I thought, these are very beautiful sculptural objects. I don't want to destroy that. I don't want the loofah inside more than I want to keep this as a piece of really beautiful natural art. And of course, so many seed heads are very, very beautiful. This is Allium Schubertii, extraordinary starburst with these little seed heads at the end. You have the cardoon seed heads. And of course, everybody knows about the honesty seed heads with this very familiar moon-like disc. And if you keep them dry and look after them, they will last for years. Now, still to come on today's programme. Adam discovers the plants that will cope best with the increasing extremes of temperature.
What has for you been the star?
Grevillea.
Grevillea.
You can't necessarily see the flower from a distance, but you get close up, it's full-on flower.
And we follow the journey of a family who made what is perhaps the ultimate impulse buy, a botanical garden that they saw on the internet. Good grief.
Whoa, what are we doing? It's amazing.
But first, we're going to another of your gardens. And this one belongs to Howard Calcutt.
Hello, my name's Howard. Welcome to my garden here in Weston-super-Mare. In the past, our garden, our lawn, has been the rather compact setting for family games of cricket and football. But times change. And last autumn, we took the decision to bid farewell to our well-manicured green carpet and say hello to the wildflower garden. We sourced quality seed from a specialist company and created this mix of grass pathways and borders that allow us to walk right amongst the flowers. Where once we had a plain green plateau, we now have a much more vibrant palette of depth and colour that's a real joy. And the bees and other pollinators love it too. It's been really exciting to see the garden develop and new colours appear and new plants suddenly come to life. So I hope you enjoyed watching it too.
Howard, I think that looks absolutely stunning. And of course, it's easy to do. You just cultivate a piece of ground, scatter the seed, and they will grow. Now, sowing annuals, whether you scatter them or grow them in a seed tray, is a really good way of adding colour and texture and shape to your garden. And it's worth pointing out, an annual is a plant that grows, flowers, sets seeds, and dies all in the same growing season. And what I'm saying now are cosmos. These come in a wide range of colours. I've got white purity, which will be fantastic for the writing garden and the cottage garden. I've got dazzler, which we grow in the jewel garden. And then a new one on me. And this is Kiro, which is a primrose colour. Cosmos seed is very distinctive. It's long and thin. If you can, try and sow them a good distance apart. And this, by the way, is a peat-free compost mixed with some perlite to help drainage. So I'm just going to sprinkle them on here about an inch or so apart. Now what I do is just gently press the seeds down so they make good contact with the compost, and then cover them lightly. And you can do this with vermiculite, but if you just take a handful of compost and sprinkle it over. There we go. Water that and put it somewhere warm. Now they do need warmth, so a windowsill above a radiator is fine. If you've got a greenhouse, that's great. And then let them grow on, keep them watered. Then they can be pricked out, and I'll be doing that with you in a few weeks' time. So when we plant them out, we have nice, healthy plants that will grow strongly and stay flowering until the weather gets cold. Now, Adam paid a visit to RHS Hyde Hall in Essex, where, like the rest of us, they've had extreme heat and drought last summer and also extreme cold this winter, to see what lessons can be learned.
In mind. But last year, that was a special one, wasn't it?
Took everybody quite by surprise, perhaps, especially during the summer. I mean, that long spell of dryness that we had, then hitting, well, nearly 40 degrees. We then get the wet back with us, yeah, we had quite a wet autumn. And then December comes along, and you've got the -7s, and it was cold for a very long period of time.
So when you think about it, you've had that real stress of the summer. So I'm really stressed. Then you cheer me up by giving me a load of water, so I get a bit excited. And then you throw me in a freezer.
Yeah, and it does mean things are going to suffer.
So, what has had a particular kick in this garden?
There have been a few things, using your expression of kicking, and the formium, the New Zealand flax, as you can sort of see in its heart completely shriveled, which actually I'm just waiting to sort of see what comes out. This is Aloe striatula. It comes from South Africa. Usually is a good stalwart for us. Absolutely been hammered. If you actually sort of delve in a little bit more, you can see there's still some green.
Yeah, there is, isn't there?
And therefore, that's going to survive.
So you leave that be, because it will tell you where to cut
Back to. Yeah, exactly. Things like the Carpobrotus here, absolutely a succulent plant through and through, full of water, and yet in this little niche it's managed to survive. So as you can see, completely gone, but lower down you've still got this succulent material, and it's turgid, it's full.
Yeah, and that's just ultimately against that rock, isn't it? If you put your hand on that, mate, it's a cold day today, but that's not cold to the touch,
Still
really, is it?
got a warmth to it.
It's amazing, isn't it? Tiny little microclimates, just enough to help something.
For me, this is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, for the plant, probably not quite so.
No.
Normally, these little beauties would be not a million miles away from doing their thing, would they?
Absolutely. April, May time, they'd be full in flower, and echiums, for us, do so well. But as you can sort of see, this winter really been hit.
Cold weather after our summer's just seen them off.
Absolutely. But the beauty of things like echium, and similar to foxgloves, is they're biennials. So what that then means is hopefully set some seed in the ground already from last year, and therefore we haven't lost them completely.
Because actually interesting looking down here, you've got verbascums already coming up, and the poppies, that's last year's seed.
That is.
And they're going to fill ultimately this void, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that is the beauty of something like the Echium. As a biannual, you've got, yeah, that insurance policy. You've got the seed in the ground, it's going to come back.
Yeah. We've just gone round and looked for the problems, but actually, overall, the garden's still looking pretty good, you know. So, what has for you been the stars that have benefited from the heat and the cold?
Grevillea.
Grevillea.
You can't necessarily see the flower so much from a distance, but you get close up, it's full on flower.
Yeah, it is,
and the
that's good.
summer has done it so well.
Yeah, you've got a yellow one over there, haven't you? That's a younger one.
Yeah,
That's
there's
looking
one
really
called
good.
Sulphurea, which is flowering its heart out. And it's just good to see these sort of plants from Australia doing so well. We've got other examples like Callistemon, but also plants that, you know, come from desert regions in America. Dazzalurion flowered 2 years ago for us.
Fascinating though, isn't it? Because a lot of the plants that you've talked about, you start to feel, you know, small leaves, quite oily,
Yeah.
you know, maybe not full of moisture through the winter months. Loves the dry conditions, will tolerate element of cold, but then loves the hot conditions. I think we can agree as gardeners, we're going to have to give some real thought to the plants we want to grow in our gardens in the years to come. Who knows if the extreme temperatures of last summer, coupled with the relentless cold and wet of this winter, will become the norm. But we will always talk about the weather, and you can guarantee one thing, it will throw its challenges. It's all about understanding what's going on outside your back door. We do that, and we've got a little bit more chance of getting more from our own gardens.
It'll be fascinating to see how Adam adapts his garden as a response to this, and of course we will be visiting it and seeing him as he goes along. And here at Longmeadow, I've really been thinking all winter about what changes I need to make here. In fact, what we all need to make, because this affects everybody. So one of the things I'm going to do this year is to change the planting so it's much hardier. And that doesn't mean getting rid of all the ones that we've grown to love over the years, just some of them. Quite a few have coped really rather well under these extreme conditions. Take clematis, for example. They've all come through the drought of last summer. They've survived flood and extreme frost, and I fully expect them to perform well again this year. But there are jobs that need doing. So the group 3 clematis, and these are the ones like Clematis Viticella that start flowering in late June or July and go on into autumn, they all need pruning now, because all those flowers are produced on this year's growth. So none of this brown material will produce flowers. But if I left this, the top will grow much more vigorously, because it's closer to the light, than these shoots underneath, and they'll be shaded out. And what you get is a great mass of bare, tangled growth with a clump of flowers high up above, and that's not a good look. So what I do is cut them at about that sort of height in the border, because there's so much vigorous growth around them, it shades them out. If it's out in the open or against a trellis or a wall, you can go right down to the bottom juicy bud. A nice big bud, cut just above it, and that's fine, and they'll grow. And they're very easy. You just take a mass of growth like that and cut. Cut these. I will put this through the shredder, and this will be added to the compost heap. Now it's time to visit another of your gardens, and this one takes us to Andalusia in Spain, and it belongs to Katie Pilditch.
Hello, my name is Katie, and I live with my husband Bob and my mother Anne in Andalusia in Spain, in a cortijo set in an olive grove. We've lived here 17 years, and it's taken us nearly this long to renovate our house and the outbuildings into a home. When the builders had finished with the pallets of bricks, I reclaimed this small area of ground and made my first flower bed. When the young boy, David, from next door saw what I was doing, he came one day through the olive groves with a wheelbarrow full of goat manure and 3 small pieces of an iris he had growing in his own garden. The irises in this bed haven't done very well this year. It's slightly shaded by an olive tree, so I've decided to dig some up and move them and make a whole new bed of irises. In the UK, you would plant an iris with the rhizome quite close to the surface of the soil because they like to bake in the sun. But here in Spain, with temperatures of plus 40 degrees centigrade, the rhizome would soon dry out, so we plant them a little deeper. We also make a small well around the plant so that when we water, the water will sit close to the plant roots and not run away down the hill. The irises David gave me have grown over the years, and I've split them and put them in different beds all around the house. This is the last bed I made, and in April, when they're in full bloom, the smell is absolutely amazing. And every time I come out here, I'm reminded of the kindness of David all those years ago, helping me to make my very first flower bed. Thank you for visiting us here in Spain, and happy gardening to everyone. Bye.
It's fascinating to see how Katie has had to adapt the received way of growing the iris to cope with the extreme heat of that Spanish sun, because obviously we're all taught you need to bake them. But didn't they look wonderful? Obviously, whatever she was doing, it was exactly right. Now, here in the spring garden, true to its name, we have all kinds of flowers coming through. There's a witch hazel in full flower. We've got the daffodils beginning, the hellebores, the snowflakes, which will be followed by the imperial crown fritillaries. And so it will go until the canopy closes over at the end of May. And by June, this particular performance is done. But while it lasts, it's pure joy. They do say that in the month of March you can get every kind of weather in a day. So today we've gone from frost, really nice sunshine, and now suddenly we've got snow. And no doubt before the day's out we'll get rain too. I've set out to plant this clematis in the writing garden, so snow or not, I'm going to do it. It's one of the Carpmannii group called Avalanche. It's got lovely dark foliage and small white flowers that are produced in spring. And the idea is to plant it to scramble up through this shrub. This is winter honeysuckle, Lonicera fragrantissima. Started flowering before Christmas, still flowering now, but it's coming to its end. So when that finishes, this will take over, and then when they both finish flowering, round about the middle to the end of May, I can prune them if I want to, because they both need pruning at that time. Now this is group 1, but it doesn't matter whether you've got group 1, group 2, or group 3 clematis, all of them should be planted in the same way. It's important that they're in good rich soil, so dig quite a deep hole, deeper than the pot size, so you can put organic matter underneath. And then when you plant a clematis, you always plant it deeper than it is in the pot. So you want to plant it at about the level of my finger there. And we'll just pop that in like that. Clematis like cool, moist roots, and then they grow up into the sun. Even though it's snowing, it is important to water this in, and water it very thoroughly. The one thing that will ensure it performs well is having its roots down into plenty of moisture. And what will happen is that will go down and the compost I put in under it will soak it up. And then we can put the soil back around it. Are you paying attention? Learning how to do it. And when the snow has gone and that's settled a bit, I will mulch that really thickly. And that will keep it cool and moist. As long as the roots are cool and damp, everything else will cope fine. Now, while the snow continues to fall and it gets colder here at Longmeadow, let's go to Barbados, because that's where Matthew Young and his family are. And whilst Matthew was browsing on the internet one day, he impulsively bought himself a botanical garden, as you do.
Hello, my name is Matthew, and normally my wife and I have bought it, and it is now basically our responsibility to resurrect the garden. So I think when we really start to tackle it, I think that will be the first real care and attention the place has had in possibly 2 or 3 years now. I'm probably trampling something priceless while I'm doing this. The garden was created by Dr. Jim Taggart. Jim turned it into a botanical garden with the help of his 2 sons, one of whom, Jamie, went on to become absolutely integral to the place in the later years. And there's about, I think, 4,000 different plant species in this place. And Jim and Jamie were both the kind of collectors who wanted some of everything. So there's tons of grasses, there's tons of ferns, the epic trees in this garden. There's collections of carnivorous plants. There's something like 400 species of rhododendron alone. So I think they were just interested, just absolutely passionate collectors. Well, there's just so many ferns in this garden. I think Jamie was really into them. And not only that, but it's the perfect environment for them. This is technically, it's a temperate rainforest. So trying to figure out what is just a fern that just lives here because that's what grows around this part of the world, but something like that looks very much like it's a deliberate part of a collection, obviously, and learning to tell the difference is something I'm going to have to do pretty quickly. I find myself walking around here and I'm looking at all the tags and it's just, I've never heard of that, I don't know what that is, I've no idea what's going on here. A what? And at some point in the future, presumably, I'll be walking around going, oh yeah, that's a thingamajig, that's a whatchamacallit, that's it, and I'll know all this stuff. But at the moment, I'm sort of looking at this, just this vast quantity of information that I've got to shoehorn into my head somehow. Inula siciliana? Vietnam 27Z, very beautiful tree, large seed. Vietnam 038, Hymenopteris Henry II. This looks like a propagation bench, doesn't it? But we'll clean it out and then start using it again, because it'd be a bit reckless to just get stuck into the garden. But here, once this place gets cleaned out, I can actually start to plant some stuff of my own. Just don't want to ruin anything that I shouldn't be ruining, that's all. One of the ways I keep describing this garden is if I applied for this job, I wouldn't even get an interview. I'm a decent amateur gardener, that's it. There's so much knowledge that you need to do something like this, and I don't think figuring it out as you go along, for all that's how I've done more or less everything in my whole life so far, I think in this particular case, I kind of owe it to what's here to take the job a bit more seriously than that. So I've been accepted onto the BSc in horticulture. I think that will make a huge difference, and it will make the whole thing seem more manageable. In order to retain your botanical garden status, you have to have meticulous records about what the plant is, where it was collected, who collected it, when they collected it. And at the moment, I don't think we really have that, but we have got these cards. So, for example, Acer pseudoplatanus, top lawn, gift from MR 1972. So this must be the top lawn up here, and so there must be an Acer around here that was a gift from MR in 1972. This is going to be like the #1 most challenging project of the whole thing. So one of the very first things that I'm going to try and do is get a couple of friendly experts in here and identify the really valuable specimens that, you know, I need to protect. Well, somewhere underneath all this is a huge round pond. I mean, I've seen photos, but I just never understood how huge that sort of fern mountain is. Goodness knows what these things are. I mean, look at those little sort of spiky cucumbers coming up off the top of that. It is a Jurassic Park. It's like the Lost World. It's just incredible. Trying to catalogue everything properly, or finding something beautiful that I fail to keep alive, it's going to drive me absolutely insane. But in that way that you feel like you're doing something proper, like something worth doing, you know? So I need a mission. Oh, this is going to be it. So it better work, because we're committed now. If I'm not back in an hour, send help.
In you come. Come on. Lovely to come in the warm. We shall be following Matthew's progress over the coming months, and the intention is to open the garden to the public, so you can visit, but for details, go to our website. Now, this greenhouse, which obviously in summer we used to grow tomatoes, we grew loofahs last year. In the winter, we fill it full of salad crop. Now, rocket is one of my favourite plants, and that is a cool weather crop. It loves spring and autumn, it's perfect conditions. There are two types of rocket. This, which is the annual rocket, and then I've got growing here the perennial rocket. Now this, you can see, is very different. It's got a much more serrated leaf. It's what you normally get served if you have rocket in a restaurant or if you buy it bagged up as part of a salad. It's hardier, it travels really well, it stores really well. But to my mind, it's not half as tasty or delicious as the annual rocket, which we have here. And the reason why you very rarely can buy this is because it doesn't store well. It really needs to be picked and eaten, if not the same day, certainly the next day. The soil, you can see, is good and rich. They like rich soil, plenty of moisture. Ned, you're in the way. Can you move? No. Okay, let's get a spacing here. Now I'm planting these a hand span apart. It's about 8–9 inches. 6 inches is the minimum. And then just make a hole and just firm them gently in. Now I'll finish planting all these and water them in well. It is important that rocket doesn't dry out, because when it dries out and is stressed, its inclination is to bolt. And that takes away the flavour from the leaves, it puts all the energy into flowers. So keep them well watered. I would expect these to be ready for harvesting in about 2 weeks' time, be at their best in about a month, and then go on producing lovely leaves for another month or so after that. Now, while I finish this, here are some jobs for you this weekend. It's a good idea to chit potatoes before planting, particularly with first earlies. All this involves is putting them in a container of some kind so they are exposed to light but protected from frost. And after a few weeks they will develop stubby shoots which, when you plant them, will explode into light. It's time to cut back autumn fruiting raspberries, and these are the ones that produce their fruit from August through till October. Take off all last year's growth right back down to the ground, because this will let light and air in for the new shoots to appear, and it's on these new shoots that this year's fruit develop. And then the canes can be taken to be shredded and added to the compost heap. If you haven't done so already, it's time to sow sweet peas, and this should be done as soon as possible. They have a long tap root, so use a pot or a root trainer, and I like to put 3 in a pot, which will be planted out as a group. Cover them over, put them somewhere warm to germinate, and they should be ready to plant out round about the end of April. Come on, in you come. Come on, you can come in too. There you are, Pat. Well, it's getting rather chilly out there, and Patty feels the cold, so we're coming into this greenhouse. And the wooden greenhouse, is heated. We have this heater that works on a thermostat, and it keeps the temperature always above 7 degrees. And it means we have succulents of various kinds, we have cacti, we've got pelargoniums, we've got salvias, we've got a few houseplants, we've got fuchsias. These are all perfectly happy in here, and then they'll be ready to put into their appropriate places when the weather gets better. Now, on Monday, we have the spring equinox, and that means that the days will be longer than the nights. And that's great for us, but it's even better for plants, because an awful lot of plants are triggered into growth by light rather than heat. And so they will start to be putting on new shoots, new leaves, new flower buds, really setting themselves up to look as good as possible from spring through into summer. But I'm afraid that's it for today. Remember that it's Mothering Sunday on Sunday, and we will be back here at Longmeadow at 8 o'clock next Friday. See you then. Bye-bye.